Today we are going to look at seafood as a protein source. So what are we going to learn today? We're going to learn about the nutrition of seafood, types of different seafood, selecting seafood, and also different cooking methods. So as we talk about this, there are two categories that make up seafood, and the first one is fin fish, and that's what we typically just call fish. So instead of going around saying I'm gonna make some fin fish tonight, we just say I'm having fish tonight. So it's considered a fin fish if it has fins and a backbone. And then we have shellfish, and shellfish just has a hard outer shell instead of a backbone. So that's like your lobster, your crab. So, why is seafood good for you? Well, obviously, it's a great source of protein, which is why we're looking at it. But also, a couple different things about fat that seafood has. Seafood is really low in the saturated fat, which we consider the bad fat, and leads to clogging arteries and heart disease. And it's very high in mono and polyunsaturated fats, which is considered a healthy fat. It's also very high and one of the best sources for omega 3 fatty acids, which studies have shown that can help to reduce the risk of heart disease and been shown to promote nervous system development. As far as minerals and vitamins go, seafood provides a good, well, fish provides a good amount of iron as well as calcium and iodine, and fish also provides a good amount of vitamin A and D for you. So we're going to look at fish now, and then we'll talk about shellfish. So there's two categories of fish. First is lean fish, which is also known as whitefish, and it has very, very little fat in their flesh. And it's called whitefish because the flesh looks white. And so haddock and cod are two examples of that, and you can see that in the lower right-hand corner. And then there's fat fish, which it just has a fattier flesh. Typically, the flesh is going to be a pink, yellow, or gray color, and trout and salmon are two examples of that. So you can see the difference in the salmon flesh here versus the cod flesh. So, purchasing fresh fish, if you purchase it fresh, like from a fish market, these are the different ways that you can get the fish. So, the whole fish, okay, is pretty much just straight out of the water. Um, you have to clean it and fillet it before you cook it. Then the next one is a drawn fish, and that has the entrails, which is still the insides. Those are actually removed. Okay, a dressed fish has the entrails, the head, the fins, and the scales removed. It can be cooked that way. Fish steaks is the next one, and those are just cutting the dressed fish in cross sectional slices. And then we have fish fillets, which is probably what most of us get, but that's the sides of the fish that have been cut away from the backbone. Fillets should have very few bones, and that's probably the most popular. It's also the most expensive because it takes a lot more work to fillet the fish than just buy it as a dressed fish or a fish steak or a whole fish. So, cost. So, like I said, fillets cost more because of their processing time. And so you can save money by filleting your own fish at home. And also your geographical location. You know, if you're really far inland, the longer the process is that fish is shipped to you, the more expensive it's going to be. So things to look for when you're buying fresh fish is that the body should be stiff, scales should be tight, and the flesh should be firm. Gills, should be red. Eyes should be bulging. Little or no slime on the body. And fish, it's going to smell like fish, but it should smell fresh. It shouldn't smell like it's rotting. And actually, if you poke the side of the fish, an indentation should not be left by your finger. So typically, fresh fish is going to be stored on ice, and if that ice is not properly drained, the fish will become waterlogged, and then that becomes a poor quality fish. So then shellfish is the next category of seafood, and again, this is where they have that backbone. They have a hard shell instead of a backbone. So two categories of shellfish are crustaceans, and so that is covered by firm shells and have segmented bodies. So that just means like their bodies have sections. So like shrimp, lobster, and crab. So like if we look at the crab here, you know how the leg has different sections. Right here, okay, there's an example. The shrimp, has all these different sections. And then you have mollusks, and that's soft bodies that are partially or fully covered by hard shells. So oysters, clams, and scallops. And the outlier, but still considered a mollusk, is squid and octopus, even though they don't have that hard outer shell. So let's talk a little bit about each crustacean. So shrimp. Shrimp is the most common shellfish eaten in the United States, and it's typically sold by size, so like jumbo, large, medium, and small. Selling it, so when it's sold fresh, it's sold without the head and the thorax. So in this picture, you can see this is typically how you buy shrimp. The head and kind of that middle part has been cut off, and it's typically deveined. And so that's the fish, that's the shrimp being deveined. And basically, what you're doing is you're taking out the intestinal tract. So you're taking out its poop, is what you're doing. So a lot of us buy it already deveined, already peeled, and just ready to be cooked. So then we have lobster and crab. Something I think is kind of fun is that lobster shells are dark green blue when they're caught, and they only become red when they're cooked. So they actually look like this. So if you've ever been at a store where they sell live crab, that's why they're not bright red. If you're going to buy them live, the legs should be moving and their tails should snap back quickly after being flattened. Then we have crab, and you can see a couple of the most common species that are sold in the United States. They can be bought live in the shell. What's pretty popular are king crab legs, and claws are also popular as well. So if you're not buying fresh, these are a couple different ways that you can also buy seafood. So you can buy seafood frozen. The nice part about frozen seafood is that because seafood is highly perishable, it's frozen very quickly after being caught and processed. So the quality is very close to being fresh. You can also buy it canned. So typically, you can buy tuna, salmon, sardines, shrimp, crab, lobster, and clams are available canned. And when you're looking to buy canned seafood, you want to try and look for a stored in water option over oil for a healthier option. And then there's cured, which basically just means that the fish has been preserved by drying, smoking, or pickling. A lot of the times they use salt to keep the fish fresh longer, which just means it's going to be higher in the sodium content. So some examples of where you might see these methods are like dried and salted cod, smoked salmon, and pickled herring. All right, so storing. So seafood is very perishable. You have a very small, like 1 to 2 day window to be able to use seafood. So if you buy it fresh and you're not going to use it right away, you want to refrigerate it, and you can wrap it in wax paper or foil and put it in a really tightly covered container and put it in the coldest part of the fridge. But you have to use it within a day or two. If you buy it fresh and then you want to freeze it, okay, so you're just going to take a little extra step there, wrapping it in moisture proof material, putting it in the freezer, and you actually want to use that within 2 weeks. If you buy it frozen, you just keep it in the original packaging and get it back in the freezer as soon as possible. And if you buy it canned, you want to store in a cool, dark, and dry place. When it's open, just refrigerate and use within 1 to 2 days. All right, so cooking fish. So when fish is cooked to the proper doneness, the flesh should flake easily with a fork. Flesh will lose its translucent appearance and look opaque. So the fresh flesh, it's like you can almost see through it. Like it's not really like a solid color. And then when you do buy it, it kind of changes, and so the fish flesh becomes less see-through. So with fish, broiling, just a couple little tips for each different ways that you can cook this. Broiling is you want to broil a fish that is at least an inch thick, and that's because broiling is done at such a high heat. If there's not a lot of thickness to that fish, you're just going to burn and crisp it up right away. Grilling is a great option. Baking is great, but it can dry out, so you want to make sure to brush it with some sort of oil or sauce. Frying, typically when we fry, not always though, we're used to our Friday fish fries here in the Midwest. So typically it's coated with a batter and then fried. Usually fries bite size or a little bigger. Poaching is where you submerge the fish in liquid and you cook it on low until it cooks through. And then steaming, that's no different than like steaming vegetables. So similar to poaching, but obviously a lot less liquid. You cover it and let the steam cook the fish. So then cooking shellfish, the biggest thing is if you're purchasing shellfish while it is alive, you have to cook it while it is alive. If it dies, it deteriorates in quality very, very fast. So just different ways that you can do this is simmered. So in a pot of water, you're just going to simmer that until it's cooked. You can bake it, you can broil it, you can grill it. Sauteing it is pretty common, and then you can also deep fry it. So that is just some basics for seafood. And then you're going to go ahead and complete the seafood row on Google Classroom, which I accidentally titled fish. And since it's already pushed out to you guys, I cannot fix it. So it's actually the seafood row. So when you're talking about the animal sources, think about all the different animals that I talked about here. I definitely talked about some health benefits. So you could just cite this presentation as a source if you would like to, and then just do those health risks and find a recipe that you think would be interesting to make with seafood.